Welcome to Quantum Alchemist Master Podcast. In this space, we share our journey in the awakening and integration process without judgment, building an all-inclusive community of awareness, love, support, and full acceptance. Reminding you that you are the master, you are the healer, you are the medicine, you are a divine, infinite, multidimensional being. You are source in human form. We all are. Everything you seek outside of you is inside, inviting you to go within so that you remember who you really are. Step into your true potential, create your own reality, and contribute to the reality of the collective. The change starts with you. We're all one, and love is the answer. Good morning, Francis. Welcome to the Quantum Alchemist Master Podcast. It is a pleasure to have you. I'm so excited to speak with you today, hear about you, your journey, your gifts, and whatever you have to share with the audience. So please tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you are today. I'm so excited.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And we did just chat a little bit beforehand, and I feel so just happy to meet you because as we're chatting, it sounds like we're just so aligned, and I think that's what I love about this path is meeting people who are also saying, you're your own master, you have your own journey, I can support you, but ultimately this path is yours. And it's just really beautiful to meet you. You have really beautiful energy, and what you're doing is incredible. So thank you so much, and for giving me this space. Oh my goodness, I don't quite know where to begin. So like you mentioned, my sort of like handle for social media is dropout psychologist.
I was intrigued by that, I gotta say.
It took me a while to come up with, but once I thought of it, I thought that's it, because it really very quickly explains a lot of where I am now. So, oh gosh, okay, so where do I start? So previously I was a clinical psychologist. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology. And I went through the training model that well, up even more than that. So right now I'm actually living half Norway, Sweden, Finland. Partner is Sápmi, so I live here half the year, and then the rest of the year I'm truly nomadic. So in the last 8 years, I've lived in over 250 places. And it's like, it's settling now. Primarily what I do is I'm here, I'm in Mongolia, I'm in Greenland, and sometimes I go back to the USA to visit family. So I was born in Arizona. I am of primarily European, non-Indigenous ancestry. It's funny, I've actually come to say European non-Indigenous because Sápmi are actually the only Indigenous folks they're white. And so for me, that was like a bit of a trip when I first was like integrating here in the community. But now it's very natural for me to say European non-Indigenous. So I was born in Arizona, like middle-class family, one of those families where it's like, you're going to go to college and had enough privilege to always have food on the table, never knew scarcity that way. But I think what so on that track, I went to university, I got the PhD, and I went into private practice. And that whole journey took me a long time. So I wasn't fully practicing as a psychologist, like licensed in private practice until my early. Rosalia, I had been in private practice and I was a complete atheist, total atheist. I thought chakras were like some new age, like junk trying to sell you something. I thought ghosts aren't real, I couldn't have been more like the snotty kind that's like, well, I know better, Okay, so I had been in private practice for maybe only a year or two, and that was it. Like my time was up and I was called by the spirits. So I went from never hearing anything or having anything kind of unusual happen to me, and not having anyone in my community to show me the way. I didn't have elders, to suddenly being called by the spirits. And it was tough. It was a really hard couple of first years. You can imagine, I mean, you being a nurse practitioner, like these are very, what I'll say is like colonized spaces. And when you walk into these spaces, you have your script, right? We're all accepting the myths of like mental health and diagnoses. And yeah, so what happened is I started talking to like my client, who was, quote unquote client. And I'll never forget, it came out of nowhere. And so I was very new to hearing spirits. And I was talking to this woman with anxiety, and I suddenly hear a voice in my head that says, "She's lying to you. Ask her again what she did last night." And sure enough, like, so from the beginning, it was evidential. And so what happened was, in a almost an instant, I had to ask myself, do I believe in the concept of crazy? Or is what's happening to me true? And if it's true, I can no longer be a clinical psychologist. And so that's what happened. I completely walked away from, not just from my profession, I think you can probably relate, but literally everything that had shaped me up until that moment. So it was a rough few years. But fast forward some years later, and that in and of itself is a whole long chapter. I moved to Nepal. I had some very difficult experiences. It was kind of the dark night of the soul time, and I think a lot of your listeners, and I know you can relate because I've read about you, but skipping over that, I was very lost. I didn't know who I was. I was no longer a clinical psychologist, but I hadn't figured out where the next port was. And some spirits came to me and they said, "You're not going to know who you are until you go to Mongolia." Now, I had heard of Mongolia, but I don't think I could have pointed to it on a map. Maybe the general region. And at that point, honestly, they had messed around with me so much. I told them to F off. And I was like, I'm not, like, that's a bridge too far. Like, and they said, "Frances, the door will open and all you have to do is walk through." And that's what happened. And it happened in a funny way, but they said, when you get there, you'll understand the truth of who you are. And when I got there, well, the way that I got there was I was on a retreat, a shamanic retreat in Sweden, and there were some Russian women there. And at the end of the retreat, the Russian women said, "We're doing a pilgrimage to this lake in Siberia. It's a very spiritual, sacred lake. Anyone who wants to go is welcome to join us." And these voices in my spirits, they said, "That's the door." They said, "Look it up on a map. You're just going to be a couple hours away from Mongolia. You know these women." By that time, we had been going through some very deep processing work together. I loved them. I trusted them. They said, "You're just going to meet them in Siberia and then you're there." So it was wild. I went back to the USA. I got my visa in order for Russia. I prepared everything. I had my ticket for Siberia. I had my ticket for the Trans-Siberian Railway to get me down into Mongolia. 1 week before I was supposed to go, they canceled. They canceled everything. And I was like, to my spirits, I was like, "What?" And they said, "Well, we just said we're going to open the door. We never said other people were going with you." They're like, "So you got your tickets. Like, what are you complaining about?" And so I went.
I'm processing. Sorry.
I know this story, and I'm already skipping over so many unusual parts of this story, but it was, it was a lot to process. And so when I got to Mongolia, that's when I learned, and I used this word almost with a lot of hesitation because it's so misused, but the word shaman, the origin of the word is specifically the sacred healers of Mongolia and the neighboring regions. So as you know, there are sacred healers in all cultures across the world, right? So there are the sacred healers in Chiapas, there are the sacred healers in Greenland, there are the sacred healers in the dominant culture of the USA, although they often get called crazy. and we're missing them. But in healthy cultures all over the world, the souls of the sacred healers have their path to become the sacred healer. In Mongolia specifically, that's where the shamans are. Well, when I got there, I was recognized as a shaman. And I've had not just one, but many Mongolian shamans remember me in my past lives being a shaman there. And so like, even when I say it out loud, part of me is like, oh my gosh, Frances, I cannot believe like, what happened. But so I'm initiated into a line of shamans there. And I do spend part of my time each year there where I'm actually in community with people. And that's, a heart of the definition is you need to be recognized by the community. And I have family there. I have my teacher there. And I do the activities of a shaman there, the healing work, the channeling, spirit removal, soul retrieval, all that stuff as the shaman. So that's where Dropout Psychologist comes from, because that is officially behind me. And now in Mongolia, they call me a shaman.
Wow. Sorry, I resonate with everything you're saying, like to an extent that we'll talk after you finish here the podcast. But I can, you're a total reflection of of my path as well. There's no coincidence that you're here today, that we're having this conversation. And obviously I believe everything you're saying because I feel identify with it. It's very similar to my own path. And for those people listening, you're not alone. You're not alone. It's not only the dark night of the soul, but just learning, when your clairs begin to open and everything else, beginning to kind of assimilate and integrate that into your daily life, into your relationships, your kids, your partners, just everything you do, your 3D job. It's challenging, but it's through those challenges that we alchemize and become ultimately, who we always were meant to be. So it's just that beautiful remembering. And sorry, I cut you off. I just felt called to kind of share that a little bit. I'm sure a lot of people will feel identify with your story.
I think that has become one of the most remarkable things about this story, because like you're saying, it's part of the journey, isn't it? To go through that darkness. And I'm skipping over it for now, but it was years of confusion, loneliness, rapid acceleration of karma. I was suddenly in my first abusive relationship ever. It happened after we could say, I call it the popcorning, where I just popped open. And it was hell. And I was so lonely then. And I think that's become such a huge part of why I have alchemized myself into sharing my story. I no longer care if people call me crazy, because those aren't the people that I need to be in connection with. I want my story to be heard, because it's amazing to me how many people, to this outrageous story of this like suburban kid raised on eating nachos in Arizona to being a shaman in Mongolia, like who could relate to that, But I am finding people all over the world that relate to this story in their own way. And if I can just be a voice, especially for those going through that beginning part. And now a lot of the work that I do is sitting with people when they're in the dark part, you're walking through the tunnel and you don't know where you're going and if you're going to make it. If my story can be a light for people on their path, just that radical transformation of needing to go into trust, then it's all worth it. So.
Wow. I'm just amazed. I'm sure there's so much more that you have to share. I always like to include, like, I say funny. It doesn't have to be funny. It could be dramatic or sad, whatever. It doesn't matter. But I always like to include kind of like a story of anything.
No problem.
Yeah. Because I feel like first of all, I want to bring storytelling back, even if it's through a podcast. And I love just sitting in circle, sharing in circle. And even though, I do feel this eventually will become a circle, or it is a circle, because it's going to go around and reach whoever needs to hear it. So to me, we're still sharing in circle, even if it's through here. And I always love to share funny stories, because first, it tells us more about the speaker, the guest speaker that we have on. A lot of people could relate that it's not always perfect. Like, it's crazy,
girl,
the crazy
no.
stories. Like, if you think you're having it bad, like, just listen to the stories that we put on here. Like,
I've got those.
next level stuff, like so stuff like that. Is there any particular story that comes to mind? Could be funny, sad. It doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh, that's all I have. So I actually I just released my first season of my podcast. So it's 8 episodes, and it's self-contained, and it is my wildest stories. And I named it so actually, in Mongolian shamanism, the way that it works is, when you get initiated, you take on your primary spirit guide, and that's called your own gut, and you're sort of merged for life. But more than sort of, I say for the sort of is because I don't think it's just one lifetime. I think this is a spirit that I've known many lifetimes. And I talk about this in one of my podcasts. I actually met him years before. He is such an a-hole. I have literally tried to kick him out of my life multiple times.
I fight with my guides all the time. I have the biggest tantrums. I'm the biggest baby. I'm with you.
Yeah. No, it's not all love and light. It's not easy. And so he tricked me the night before the initiation. I thought I had totally kicked him out. And I have this hilarious, I don't want to give it away, because the way he tricked me into me accepting him and getting like merged with life for him is so classic him. He's such a trickster. But it is on my podcast. So I actually named my podcast "Not All Spirits Are Jerks," named in honor of him, because he is the biggest jerk that I know.
Wow, I love that.
And I think people, when they hear this, it's like, well, why do you stick around with him? I mean, first of all, because I don't have a choice, but also I don't have any human teachers in terms of learning how to develop my clairs. I don't have any human teachers learning how to do soul retrieval work or spirit removal, chakra balancing. It all is direct from spirit and direct from him. He's an amazing bouncer. He teaches me protection. And one of the main offerings I now share with other people, especially I think in the West, there's a lot of focus on like raising vibration and releasing, but there's not, I think, enough focus on like, but we need to protect our light. And he teaches me all of that. He's also like gotten 2 people in car accidents on their way to come see me. I don't want to share that story. I have so many more stories are in the podcast, but the one person who we got in the car accident, the man wasn't a good man. Basically, this was in Mongolia, and he was very well established in a lot of corrupt money, and he was coming to me to ask for shamanic work. But like that bad vibration stuff, it just they get their hooks in you, and there's a lot of weird stories around Mongolia about them like forcing you to do curses and things. And so my spirit got him into a he wasn't hurt, but it wasn't a minor car accident on the way there. And when he walked in, he said, "Are you trying to curse me?" And my spirit said, "You tell him that was my hello. And if he does anything to try to mess with you, doesn't matter where in the world he is, I know where he will be. And the next time I won't be so kind." So he did 1 session with me and he never came back. So my spirit, he takes care of me. But that aside, he just works my ass off. And like, there's no concept of like breaks. And I hadn't been on a vacation in a really, really long time. So in 2019, and I'm sure you're going to hear in your story and your listeners as well, the weird way this all comes together in these unexpected ways. Money does not come my way that well. Like, I'm not in a great position financially, but somehow I have everything that I need. And one of the things that I have is my sister is a pilot for American Airlines, and I can use her flight benefits. That's how I can.
That's the coolest. thing, I gotta say.
I
Perks
know.
for the
Yeah.
sister. Yeah, I love it.
Like, all I want is a home and a dog. And my spirits are like, no home for you, no dog for you. I have to always keep moving, but I actually am generally able to fly for free, which is an amazing, like, I wouldn't be able to do this without that. So a couple of years ago, I was just so burned out, and I was sitting somewhere in the USA, and I thought, oh, I just need a vacation. And so this jerk spirit guide, my main spirit guide, he came to me and he said, Frances, sweetie, I should have been suspicious from the beginning. I should have, like, yeah, known something was up from the beginning, because suddenly he was being nice. He was like, you've been doing such a good job lately. Why don't you take a break? Let's go on vacation. I'm going to just leave you alone for a bit, just go relax. This story, even now, I'm like, oh, he got me good. So I was looking on, I have a way that I can go look at other flights, and you can literally in the system see, like, where, basically, if there's an empty seat on a flight on American, I can be on it. I'm the lowest priority. It doesn't mean it's not as easy as it sounds, but there are always going to be some empty flights going somewhere. So I was like, wow, like, maybe I'll go to Milan. I've never been to Italy. All the flights are booked. Maybe I'll go to Tokyo. All the flights are booked. Maybe I'll go to Mexico City. All booked, right? So I'm looking, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? I actually have a visa for China, which is rather unusual, but it's because I need to fly through China to get to Mongolia. And I think this is all me, but it's him. I'm thinking, well, why don't I check if there's any open seat on a flight to Shanghai? Because less people are going to be able to be on these flights because you need a visa for it. Sure enough, there is a flight that's like wide open. So 2 days later, I'm walking on a plane to go to Shanghai, which for my first vacation in years. The night before, I'm at Walgreens, and I'm picking up, just some like toiletries for the flight. And I walk past the aisle of cold medicine. And he said, why don't you buy some Mucinex? Which is like for your sinuses and if you have like phlegm in your throat. And I was like, are you sending me to get sick? He's like, no, why don't you just throw some Mucinex in there? Buy the Mucinex. So I buy the Mucinex. I walk on this plane. I go to Shanghai. I have a beautiful 2 days, for maybe 3 days. Fourth day, girl, this was January 2020. On the fourth day, I got COVID. I'm one of the first people in the world, because I'd taken this train line between Wuhan and Shanghai. I got COVID, and there I was in Shanghai, not knowing anyone. And he's just laughing. He was just absolutely laughing at me. He's like, I got you good this time. These are the things that he does to me.
Wow, I'm still processing because
Me too.
yeah. Wow, that was hard for you, I'm sure. I mean, even though now in retrospect, maybe you could see the why of certain things that have happened in your life. Like when you're
Yeah.
in it, and you're feeling
Yeah.
it and you're going through it and it's rough.
It is rough.
We laugh at it now, but I can only imagine that's really scary actually.
Yeah. He's very, very rough on me. And I work with so many people, and most of the work that I do outside of Mongolia is helping people develop their clairs and being on this path. And so I call it my sky team. And I have these very rough spirits around me. They're wonderful in a lot of ways, but they're very rough. But I do sit in council with other people's sky teams. And there's so many people that have these really beautiful, loving spirits. This is not everyone's experience, and I think mine is definitely the extreme. And it makes for took care of me. Oh, I think, and but there are people that I think have very different paths of just these loving spirits around them. So if anyone is listening to this at the beginning, don't let my story scare you. I am a bit of an outlier in how rough he is. A lot of people have even when they're going through their darkest times, the spirits are around them helping them, not pushing them into the darkness.
So I was going to touch on that actually, just what you just said last. A lot of the times is the way we learn. So my partner and I, we learn completely different. Like she's all of her ways are like very loving and soft and patient, and she feels and she knows, and she's just like just love, basically, if I could describe it. Then you have me on the other side, which is like very similar to you. I'm just like on the other spectrum of things, and she's like, whoa, you know. So yeah, you have no idea how I can relate with you. I'm like, maybe, yeah. And I feel, or looking back into, my dark night of the soul and whatnot, I needed it to be that way, because if it would have been soft, I wouldn't, I mean, I would have run over them, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need somebody to have the upper hand to be able to guide me, because if I'm very strong, like with my personalities, I always kind of describe them so people can understand, as to like kind of like using the Greek goddesses like Aphrodite, and like the different ones, to kind of separate the different personalities per se. And I'm usually very, very strong. So unless I have somebody that's right there with me, above me, to really guide me in that way, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's for our own good. It just sounds weird, like when we explain it, to other people.
I think that's exactly right. And I have a very similar personality. And I do trust that these spirits and my relationship with trust deepens by the day. And I do trust that this is just the perfect match for me, and other people are getting just what they need for them. And I was raised in such the illusion of safety. And a lot of what I do now also, when I use the word dropout psychologist, what I'm saying is I'm dropping out, and a lot more than that. It's sort of like a public declaration of I'm dropping out of that project, the entire project of colonizing, because I think I'll die still colonized, because it's something that happens to us, and it's something that happens to our minds. But I now understand that in these spaces that I was raised in, my experience of safety was at the cost of so many others not being safe, and I was unknowingly part of the system that kept these myths going. By being the clinical psychologist, I was giving the story strength of like, there's someone who's an expert on you. You and I were just talking before about like how everyone has their own journey, and you have to be, you can't be the victim. You have to you have to accept that you're the master of your own journey. But I think clinical psychology is part of that bigger story that some of the dominant cultures give us, that make us lose the ability to know the strength within ourselves. Like, there's something wrong with me, I have to go see a clinical psychologist. This person who I've never met before will be able to look in a book and tell me something that I don't know about myself.
Wow, that's deep. That is so deep right now. If people are listening, if you could, I would rewind a little and re-listen to what she just said.
That's so much. I think you might like my podcast, because my podcast, it's all these wild stories, but I do consider myself a storyteller. And in a broader way, my podcast is taking my story and using it to reflect back on the culture that is over so many of us. Because I think even when we have these experiences of the sacred, we're now entering into trying to remember how to treat ourselves sacredly, but we still have all these myths of like progress over growth. So we're entering these spaces of learning how to be softer with ourselves, but instead it's like, but I need to be like more spiritual. I need to progress. I need to do my inner child work. I need to alchemize. I need to learn. And those are all beautiful practices that we can do. But if we enter it with this colonized mind that believes that we're something that needs to get better and progress, we don't have the trust that we're part of the natural world anymore. Like, For some reason, what comes to mind is a hibiscus. I don't know. Maybe it's because you're in Miami and I grew up with hibiscus plants around me too. But I imagine like this hibiscus plant that hasn't yet flowered. And like, imagine you want the hibiscus flower to come. A colonized mind is going to go up to this plant and be just yelling like, flower, grow. That's not how we grow a flower. What we need to do is we need to tend to the soil. We need to make sure there's enough sunlight. We need to have patience. And we need to know that plant knows how to make the flower. We don't need to know how to do it. We just need to give it the slowness and patience and trust. And I think that's exactly what our souls are like too. It's our birthright to the flower. But when we're like trying to progress, I'm a pearl and my soul needs to just have me trust and not push, tend to the soil, make sure, and the flowering will happen. I will grow.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah. So I think that now that I spend a lot of time
So
I think,
are you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead.
I just wanted to see if you could kind of break down a little bit for all of us, including myself, kind of what services you offer exactly, because it sounds like you've gone through so much and you've done so much. Like these days, what are you offering? How can you be the soil? What do you bring to the soil to hold the space for people that come to you to flower, just like you just finished saying, right? What are some of those offerings exactly? And if you could repeat the name of the podcast, that would be really cool too, just in case.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, the first is this podcast. This is really a project of many years of being able to figure out just how these stories can be told in a way that I think they're deadly funny. You will be laughing. But there are also a lot of there's the offering of spaciousness. I don't quite know how the podcast is like nothing else. People listen to it and they tell me like, oh my gosh, I've never heard anything like this. It's fun. And it also just, I think, offers people a different perspective on just what's happening in these colonized spaces and also in us trying to remember who we are as sacred beings. So that podcast is called Not All Spirits Are Jerks. And that in and of itself is one of my offerings that I'm the proudest of. It really took a lot to be able to put it together in many different ways. Up until this point, I've been working primarily with individuals one-on-one, but this isn't it's not working as well for me anymore. Number one, just because there's so many people, I don't think it's the best way to be able to offer what can be offered in the broader communities. And number two, I'm tired of working one-on-one because like what you're doing, it's always about community. And it's really important to me. I have one of the biggest blessings I think in my life is just like you, like I don't know what I did in my past lives, but I have the great fortune to just meet amazing people, just truly some of the most amazing people. And I want you all to know each other. That's one of the reasons why I'm moving away from doing one-on work right now in the West. So I'm starting a Patreon, and the Patreon, yeah, I'm so excited about it. So it is in its infancy, but I know it's going to be a wonderful space. And what it has is it has my offerings. So it has teachings and tutorials. I have like one of the first things that I have on there is these 3 videos that I made that teaches you how to ground, clean, and protect your energy. So it teaches these things. It's called, well, if you go to Patreon, you can just search for Dropout Psychologist and you'll find it. So it has it, and I have a teaching on there of how to connect with your ancestors for those of us who no longer have ways to connect. I'm so focused on we don't need to do like BS cultural appropriation to be sacred. And it's really important to me to offer people ways to do these practices without stealing from other cultures. So I have a lot of offerings on there like that. I have sound meditations, and then we're going to do monthly lives, and so much that can happen from there. So that is on Patreon, Dropout Psychologist, and you'll find it.
Awesome. And we're going to link it to the description of the podcast so that people can access it quickly and they don't have any issues looking for that also. That sounds amazing. And I feel like, can you hear me okay? Check in. 1, 2, 3, checking our technical here, our audio.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear you. Okay, I think I got you back now. Okay, awesome. Okay, I see you now. Perfect. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. I think we have a lot of energy exchange going on here. So we're gonna go ahead and leave.
So too, I noticed that.
Yeah, we're gonna leave the link below so that they can go and check it out. I'm gonna check it out. I'm excited. I really resonated with your vibe, with your energy, with your journey. So you're probably gonna see me around there as well. I love that we could share together as a community. There was a time where I felt really alone, especially beginning this journey. So the fact that we have community and we know that we're not alone in this, we're in this together. I love that you have that offering available. So thank you so much, Francis, for being here today. Is there any last messages or anything that you feel called to share with people, kind of to finalize this episode? I think the message is having difficulties coming in.
Eat when you're hungry. Eat when you're hungry. He's blowing up this line with our energy, I think. I have a lifelong, I don't believe in having enemies, but if I had one enemy, it would be perfection. There's no such thing, and our ancestors just want us to be happy. We can go down the path of chasing the illusion of perfection, or we can be in connection. And I think reorienting ourselves to know that community is medicine, letting go of these myths that are keeping us in suffering, it's just something that I wish for everyone.
Thank you. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for this episode, for your presence, for your energy, for everything. I really feel that every time I do an episode, I hope people could really feel the energy and the healing words and the frequency that's coming through these episodes. This is way more than this is actual medicine being shared. So I really hope people can feel the love that we do this with and that we share our gifts with the world. So thank you so much, Francis. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much to be able to offer this space so we can both all continue sharing and being on our journey together. This takes so much, and I really am grateful to you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Thank you. It really has. Give me a sec here.
Thank you so much for listening. For more, follow us on Instagram at Quantum Alchemist Master.